Kia ora. Bob Fulghum, the great storyteller. He tells one about a hot summer's day in the town of Shania. I think that's how you say it. It's on the Isle of Crete, where tourists were thick on the ground. The cafes, tempers of tourists, and waiters had risen with the heat. On a table next to mine, says Fulghum, sat a young, attractive couple, well dressed in crumpled linen and fine leather sandals. Waiting for service, they held hands, whispered affections, giggled and laughed. Suddenly they stood up, picked up their metal table, and carrying it with them, stepped together off the edge of the quay to place the table in the shallow water of the harbour. The man waited back for the two chairs. He gallantly seated his lady in the waist-high water and sat down himself. The onlookers laughed, applauded, and cheered. A sour-faced waiter came. He paused for the briefest moment, raised his eyebrows, picked up a tablecloth and cutlery, waded in the water to set the table and take their order. Minutes later, he returned with a bottle and glasses, and without pausing, waded back into the water to serve it. The couple toasted each other, toasted the waiter and the crowd, the latter replying by cheering. 3 other tables joined them to have lunch in the sea. The atmosphere in that cafe shifted from sweltering to celebrating, from frustration to festival. I was asked this last week to share my thoughts with a group in Christchurch on what could the church be in the 21st century. Of course, there are lots of answers, as many probably as there are members of churches. So my response is personal. My dreams, my vision. And the starting point for me is a story like this one, where a couple dare to be different, and the waiter who supports their subversive difference. They represent for me the church, and the cafe represents the community or society in which the couple reside. The audacious actions by this church of the waders affects those around them, causing some to copy them, join them, others to cheer them on. The whole atmosphere and then the actions of the cafe, read society, change as a result. And although Fulghum doesn't mention it, I'm sure there were 1 or 2 detractors in that cafe or among its staff who kept their criticisms to themselves. As you may have noticed, when critics are to the fore in any society, stoking an atmosphere of negativity, more negativity is often the result. And the reverse seems to be true. When praise and thankfulness are to the fore, stoking an atmosphere of positivity, then usually more positivity, productivity, and well-being are the result. Turning that tide from negativity to positivity is part of the vocation of church. This story starts as a story told by a storyteller. Storytellers, poets, musicians, and other artists have a crucial role in freeing the mind from conventions, from the way we've always done it, from the people who have always determined what it is, in order that each of us is inspired to try something new, something different, something off the key. So Church I Dream will be a place where stories are told by all sorts of people to inspire, encourage, and include each other in creating spaces and places of well-being, justice, and hope. Spirit of all this we could call God, a transformative spirit. Fulghum's story is situated in a cafe where people have stopped, gathered, sat together, and where food, drink, and hospitality are the common tongue. So church is a place, a space to gather, physically or digitally. Kind of like a mooring post, a pole in a swiftly moving river of change. A place to stop, pause, rest, refresh. But unlike these metaphors of cafe and mooring post, church only works if each of us both receive and give, are hosted and hosts, who share what we can with whoever we can. Church works when we realize that we need each other and need to be needed by each other in order to feel that we belong. We also need to eat together. As we know from studies to the early Jesus movements, in the beginning was the meal. The meal preceded any liturgies, any doctrines. It was the original action of being church. I read the newspaper article this week about the Ranui Caravan Park, home to many who haven't much. The caravan park has a bit of a checkered past that even I had heard of, well known by the local constabulary. But in the last 5 years, under the leadership of Brad Heaven, quite a last name there, the place became more about community than making money, and more a home where people belong than a lodging place of last resort. When COVID came, Brad and another resident, Pete understood community from his army days, pitched in and began distributing donated food parcels to the residents. Then they started doing a daily breakfast, then a free dinner. As Brad said, by putting on food, there's been a real change in the culture of the place. Sharing food does something. So Church I Dream is a place of food, hospitality, and waiting on each other. For these things are the foundation of community. Foundations that our forebears knew and then ritualized into a holy communion. In a sense, COVID has taught us all that there were things we did before 2019 that weren't all that important to do. And things we did before that are now even more important to do. Like encouraging the best in each other. Like caring as much as we can, when we can, how we can. And finding, when it's safe, the time and means to eat together. Actions, not beliefs. Together, not alone. This Church of the Waders, for which I dream, is not really belief-based, but action-based. To join, you have to get up and move. You don't keep sitting and ponder a doctrine or two. You move to where life is, where relief and hope can be found. Faith is a doing word, as is God. There was an opinion piece of mine published in the New Zealand Herald at Easter, about us embodying and becoming the hope of Easter. and afterwards I receive some less than complimentary correspondence, mostly along the lines of, if you don't believe what I think Christians should believe, then you, Glynn, should leave. The office of the Auckland church leaders, I didn't even know there was such a thing, made contact too, and we had a pleasant discussion. But after about 15 minutes of chatting and finding some common ground, they asked me whether I believed in the Nicene Creed. It was the moment of, is Glynn one of us or not? The story from the Bible, from Acts 11 today, recounts a similar dilemma for many of the Jesus groups in the 1st and 2nd century, when they saw and understood themselves as being part of the house of Israel. And individuals and families, like that of Cornelius, would come knocking at the door, outsiders asking to come in. What were the rules of entry? The Jesus groups were making up, or rather discarding, the rules as they went, led by the spirit of inspiration, encouragement, and inclusion. Do you have to be born a Jew to belong to the house of Israel? No, said the Jesus movements. Do you have to believe in the Torah and commandments like others did? Well, no, said the Jesus movements. Do you have to, as a male, be circumcised to belong? Well, no. Do you have to keep a kosher diet? No. So the critics would have asked, what constitutes then belonging? Surely they might have said, since you've given up on what Jews believe, you should surely leave. Could ask the same of us as Presbyterians. Do you have to like bagpipes, haggis, and Robbie Burns, or understand Robbie Burns, in order to be a Presbyterian? No. Do you have to believe in the Westminster Confession? No. Do you have to agree with the fundamental doctrines held to be so by the majority of Presbyterians? Well, no. So what constitutes belonging? When you reread these old stories from the early days of the Jesus movement, you realize there were no rules of entry. Nobody did a police check or a morality check or a belief check on the likes of Cornelius. Afterwards, apologists would say the Spirit of God was with them, like the Spirit of God was with us. But that was afterwards, not before. Anyway, what did that mean? Around the same time as Acts was being written, the author of the 4th Gospel, whom we call John, was also creating his version of Jesus, a version that reflects John's experience as a member of Jesus groups in the 2nd century. And in our reading today, John reduces the law and the prophets, the commandments and regulations, all the expectations of belief and practice, down to 3 words: love one another. And as Michael Lunig once quipped, it's as simple and as difficult as that. To love one another, we need to let each other be in, be hospitable to another, without demanding a dress, behavior, or belief code. To love one another, we need to learn the language of the other in order to hear their stories, their joys, pains, and hope. To love one another, we need to allow the other to love us, to be a community of mutuality and reciprocity. To love one another, We need to allow others a space to be different from us, believe different from us, knowing that none of us know all the truth or practice it. So the church I dream of is like this: a church on the way, a place of story to inspire, encourage, and include, a place that makes for well-being, justice, and hope, a place where these songs are sung, where spontaneity and joy are the norm. And church is a gathering with food, hospitality, mutuality, and reciprocity, a holy communion where all can belong. And church has only one commandment, one ethic, one doctrine, one plumb line, one clarion call: love one another. It is the church of friends on the way.